Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today, we're going deep into Indian real estate.
Yeah.
We've got this report from Elara Capital, and it's got everyone talking. They're saying India's residential market is like on the verge of this huge boom.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The BSE Realty Index, which tracks all those real estate companies, is actually down this year. So are investors right to be, like, worried, or is there something bigger they're missing? Let's see.
I think it's a classic case of, market sentiment versus like actual analysis.
Right.
What's interesting is Elara is not just saying, oh, there's a quick spike coming up.
Yeah.
They're saying this growth is like deeply rooted in how India's economy and society are changing.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What is this BSE Realty Index thing, and why should we even care if it's down?
So the BSE Realty Index, it's like a thermometer for the Indian real estate market.
Okay.
It tracks the stock prices of like all the major real estate companies listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange.
Mm-hmm.
So when the index goes down, it means investors are like less confident about the future of those companies and, by extension, the whole real estate market.
Gotcha. So a dip in this index means like some jitters, but it doesn't tell us the whole picture.
Right, exactly.
So what's Elara saying? Why are they so bullish on this whole thing?
Well, they start off with something pretty surprising. Grade A residential property. Those like high-end apartments and developments.
Yeah.
Those have actually outperformed the stock market for the past 5 years.
Wow, seriously?
Yeah, from 2019 to 2024, those fancy apartments actually gave better returns than like your typical stock portfolio.
That's wild. So if returns have been so good, why are investors freaking out now?
Elara says they're missing the forest for the trees.
Okay.
They're too focused on like these short-term things and not seeing the long-term trends.
Mm.
Their first big argument is that this boom in India's real estate, it's not just random luck, it's structural.
So it's not just like a blip, it's built into how India is growing.
Exactly. Think about it. India's urbanization rate is going up.
Right.
Millions of people are moving to cities every year, and they all need somewhere to live.
Of course.
And Elara is projecting this trend to just keep going strong between now and 2035.
Wow.
They even compare it to China, showing how its real estate just exploded when their GDP per person was similar to India's now.
Okay.
They believe India's on that same path.
I see the comparison to China, but isn't India's real estate market way more fragmented? Could that mess with their chances of a similar boom?
That's a great point, and Elara actually acknowledges that.
Okay.
But they say that even with all the fragmentation, the sheer size of the demand is going to be like a huge driver.
Yeah.
More people in cities means more competition for places to live, which, in theory, should push prices up.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got millions of people moving to these cities.
Right.
But can they even afford to live there? I mean, that's where things get interesting, right?
Absolutely. And that's where Lara's second argument comes in, the demand drivers.
Okay.
They say that home affordability in India is actually at a 25-year high.
Hold on. Really? That doesn't seem right with everyone saying prices are going up.
I know, right? It seems counterintuitive, but think about it this way.
Okay.
Wages are going up, mortgage rates are pretty stable, and the cost of property, like compared to what people are earning, is better than it's been in decades.
Mm-hmm.
Elara even had this chart showing how much affordability has improved in cities like Mumbai and Bengaluru.
So it's imagine a young professional in Bengaluru for the first time in forever. Buying a place actually feels possible.
Right.
Mortgage rates are steady, and their salary goes further than ever before. Sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah, it does.
But I'm curious, if it's so affordable now, why is that BSE Realty Index down this year?
That's where investor psychology comes into play. Sometimes fear and uncertainty can override the actual numbers.
Right.
But Elara believes this is just a short-term thing. They think that as more people realize how affordable homes have become, that demand is going to turn into real growth for the market.
So it's just a matter of time before things catch up.
That's what they're betting on.
Okay, but it's not just people buying their first homes driving this whole thing, right? Don't investors play a big role too?
Oh, absolutely. Elara's report talks about that too.
Oh,
They highlight how rental yields are going up in most cities, which makes buying to rent out a way more attractive idea.
yeah.
Plus, those grade A developments are seeing price increases that beat even those passive investments everyone's talking about.
So you've got everyone looking for their own place, and then you've got investors trying to get in on this boom. Sounds like a recipe for some serious growth.
Exactly. And here's another interesting detail. A lot of this investor demand is coming from NRIs, non-resident Indians.
Interesting.
They're really into high-end properties,
Hmm.
and Elara even has data showing the increase in NRO accounts, which are those bank accounts NRIs use to manage their money in India.
Oh, I see.
It all points to more overseas money flowing into real estate.
Okay, so we've got this urban migration, affordability is up, A&D, we have investors both in India and abroad. That's pretty powerful. But I bet Elara doesn't stop there. What's their next argument?
Their next argument is about, like, the mechanics of the market itself.
Yeah.
They're saying the Indian real estate scene is changing in a way that supports, like, sustained growth. And it's all thanks to consolidation.
Consolidation, what do they mean by that?
Basically, they're saying the market's becoming more concentrated.
Oh, okay.
There are fewer developers in the big cities now, but the ones still around are the big organized companies.
All right. And why is that good?
Well, because these big listed companies have better access to money, which makes them less vulnerable to economic ups and downs. They're also more transparent and professionally managed, which is good for buyers and investors.
So it's like the market's growing up, getting rid of the risky stuff, and becoming more stable.
Right.
Sounds like a good sign for investors.
Definitely. And the data backs it up. Elara's research says large, organized players now make up a crazy 80% of all land deals.
Wow.
They're basically taking over.
So it's not just about how many people want to buy, it's also about who's actually building these new homes.
Exactly.
And it seems like the big guys are in charge, but what are they focusing on? What kinds of properties are they building? Is that Elara's next big argument? You got it? Elara's next argument is all about luxury housing, like the hottest part of the market.
It's really interesting to see how India's growing wealth is changing real estate. You know, we're not just talking about more millionaires.
Right.
It's like a whole new group of people making good money who want these high-end places.
Yeah, makes sense. And Elara's report actually connects this to a bigger trend.
That's right.
They say India's, ultra high net worth individuals, those NWI,
Yeah, the UHWI.
their population is exploding and they love real estate.
It's true.
Elara even has data on how real estate is like a top asset for these folks.
Makes sense, yeah.
Okay, so that covers the luxury market. But what about the rest of India? I mean, most people can't afford those fancy places.
Right. And that brings us to Elara's fifth argument. They say there's this massive untapped potential in smaller cities, those Tier 2 cities.
Tier 2 cities, okay. What makes them so special?
Well, they're seeing strong economic growth, more investment in infrastructure, and even high participation in new stuff like cryptocurrency.
Interesting.
And here's the crazy part. Prices in some Tier 2 cities are actually higher than in certain Tier 1 markets.
Wait, hold on. Tier 2 cities having higher prices than some Tier 1 markets. That blows my mind. I never would have guessed that. What's driving that trend? Is it just a handful of super expensive properties skewing the numbers?
It's a few things, actually. Remember how we talked about rising incomes and affordability?
Yeah.
Well, that's happening in Tier 2 cities, too. You've got young professionals, entrepreneurs, even people coming back from living abroad who want a better lifestyle without the crazy prices of the big cities.
So they're willing to pay more for those perks, even if it means living outside the typical big city hubs. It's like the idea of luxury is changing, and it's not just about location anymore.
Exactly. And that brings us back to what Elara was saying about luxury leading the way. They're seeing this trend everywhere, with developers rushing to build for these new discerning buyers.
Okay, so we've covered urbanization, affordability, investors, market changes, and now this luxury boom.
Yeah.
It's a pretty strong case for growth, but I'm wondering, does Elara mention any downsides? No market goes up forever, right?
You're right. And to their credit, Elara does talk about some potential risks. One of the big ones is uncalibrated supply.
Uncalibrated supply, what does that even mean?
It basically means developers might get carried away and build too much too fast, which leads to a bunch of unsold properties.
Oh, I see.
If demand doesn't keep up with all the new construction, prices could stay flat or even drop in some areas.
So it's a classic case of supply and demand. Too much supply without enough demand can bring prices down. Makes sense. Any other risks they mention?
They also mention the possibility of regulatory changes.
Okay.
The real estate sector in India is really regulated, so any unexpected changes in policy could affect how much money developers make and the overall market sentiment.
And then there's always the chance of like interest rates going up and inflation, which makes it harder for people to buy homes and for developers to fund their projects.
Yeah, exactly. Those are all those big picture economic factors that can mess up even the most optimistic predictions. So while Elara is positive about India's real estate, they're not ignoring the potential problems.
All right, so we've got a balanced view here. Strong reasons for growth, but also some real risks to think about. Sounds like Elara is saying be cautiously optimistic, not blindly believing everything. But before we finish up, I'm really curious about who they're actually betting on. Which companies do they think are in the best position to take advantage of this wave?
Well, Alar's picks show their focus on those big, organized players with strong financials and a proven track record. One of their favorites is Oberoi Realty, which is known for its high-end developments and consistently good margins.
I'm sensing a theme here. It seems like Elara likes companies that are financially solid and good at getting things done. Who else is on their list?
Another one they highlight is Goodrich Properties. They're interesting because they're taking a more diverse approach, developing a mix of projects across different price points and segments.
So they're not just focusing on luxury. That makes them less vulnerable to changes in any one part of the market smart.
Exactly. And they're also expanding a lot into those up-and-coming Tier 2 cities we talked about.
So they're aligning themselves with those key trends we've been discussing: affordability, urbanization, and the appeal of Tier 2 cities.
Precisely. It's like they've taken Alar's ideas and turned them into their business strategy.
It all sounds very promising, but I keep thinking, is there more to this story than just numbers and market trends? What about the people involved?
That's a really important question, and one that often gets forgotten in these conversations. We can talk all day about market dynamics and financial projections, but at the end of the day, real estate is about people's lives, their hopes, their dreams.
Exactly. This potential boom in India's real estate is exciting, but it also brings up some big questions about fairness and inclusivity. Will this growth help everyone, or will it just make the gap between the rich and poor even bigger? Yeah, it's like we're seeing both the good and the bad at the same time.
Yeah.
On one side, there's this huge economic engine powered by people moving to cities, incomes going up, and tons of investment. But on the other side, there's this worry that all this growth could leave some people behind.
That's the tough part for India, and honestly, for any country growing this fast. How do you make sure everyone benefits from the growth and it doesn't just help the already rich people?
Exactly. What's the point of a real estate boom if it just makes the rich richer and makes it even harder for regular people to find affordable housing?
It's a complicated problem, and there's no easy solution. But it's a conversation we need to have, along with all this talk about market predictions and investments.
I totally agree. So as we wrap up this deep dive into India's real estate market, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that India's real estate is at a turning point.
Yeah.
There's a ton of potential for growth, driven by big demographic and economic shifts.
But that growth isn't automatically going to be inclusive or sustainable.
Exactly. It's going to need careful planning, responsible development, and a real effort to make sure everyone benefits from this boom.
So it's not just about will India's real estate keep booming, it's about how that boom will shape the country's future. Will it be a good thing for everyone, or will it create more division and inequality?
That's the big question, and I hope our listeners will keep thinking about it even after this deep dive is over.
This has been a super insightful conversation. We've talked about a lot, from the details of the market to the bigger social and economic impacts.
It's been great exploring this with you. I always find it interesting how something like real estate can tell us so much about where a country is headed.
For sure. And I think this deep dive has given our listeners a lot to consider.
I hope so. The more we understand these complicated things, the better we can make smart decisions, whether we're investors, policymakers, or just regular people who care.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time for another interesting exploration.